Good afternoon, friends, family, and colleagues from across the seas. This is Diker, President of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I'm here with my esteemed colleague and friend, Dr. Mansdorf, a psychologist expert in trauma and a fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. I'm sure many of you are aware of his really fantastic analyses. And during these days, one of the most important people, I think, in the Jerusalem Center is to have a psychologist on staff for the psychological health of all of us at the JCPA, as well as the larger community of Israel and the Jewish community, whether here or abroad. It is a dramatic day. I may say personally, having learned on the way into the office this morning that my own daughter and wife were caught up in the middle of a terror attack at the intersection, or what we call the Mahsom, which is the checkpoint between Gush Etzion and Jerusalem. And there was a very serious shooting attack with four terrorists that were shooting 6 critically injured people. It was my own daughter actually jumped out of the car to try to and applied mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to the critically injured soldier who was taken to Shaare Zedek Hospital. So these types of terror operations and murderous attacks are affecting all of us personally in some in various ways. Thank God, no one in my family was injured, and there were others that were injured, and they're being taken care of as we speak in area hospitals. But what it shows, Erwin, to our viewers, is that what our security authorities have been warning about is the Judea and Samaria, or the eastern region, what's called the former West Bank of Jordan area, is very, very tense. And what the Hamas, ISIS, and Iranian regime have successfully done is to heat up the north, the south, the east, in the Arab populations of those areas, and try to prevail upon them to carry out murderous attacks. What we did find out in the last couple of hours is that these 4 assailants, these terrorists that came from Hebron, some of them were connected to one of the best known families in Hebron. They came with axes, and they came with Kalashnikovs, M16s, with an intention of carrying out a major terror attack in Jerusalem. They were prevented from doing that from fast-acting security forces at the what they call the Tunnel Road Junction checkpoint, which many of you on this call know about. It is the checkpoint that separates the non-border, if you will, between the Gush Etzion the Gush Etzion block of 25 communities with Jerusalem. And this took place with a car that was coming from Hebron, all the way from Hebron, which is a half-hour uninterrupted travel to this checkpoint just before going into the tunnel roads and Jerusalem. So we see it's not just Gaza, but Gaza is a trigger for, as many of our viewers see, the north, as well as the Judea and Samaria areas, and areas under full Israeli control in Area C, as well as areas A and B. So this has been a very tough day, a very dramatic day. And the other point, Erwin, I think we can talk about for a minute is the fact that the Hamas have been caught red-handed using Shifa Hospital as a command and control center, which Israel has been claiming for years, and which the Hamas and many Hamas supporters, unfortunately, in the West have called blatant lies of the Israelis. And now when you have Israeli troops and our as well as the IDF spokesman inside Shifa Hospital with Hamas weaponry and ammunitions, and having stolen the fuel and the electricity from their own intensive care units, costing the lives of Palestinian Arab patients in Shifa Hospital for the good of the Hamas command and control center and the Hamas leadership. You know exactly what we're dealing with. It probably triggered or certainly encouraged President Biden to issue a very tough statement against the Hamas. Asked yesterday, when will the Israeli counteroffensive end? And his very sharp answer is when we determine that Hamas can no longer murder Israelis. That's when the campaign will end. What's your sense?
So I want to say something about Shifa, but before we get to that, I want to go back to the incident that you had today, because people are following you, have seen you on this webcast for the last couple of weeks. And what happened today was not a story.
Even the last 40 days.
That's right.
It's been 40 days.
40 days.
Can you imagine?
It's almost like a flood. But one of the things, when you read about a terror attack in a newspaper or you hear about it on TV, it's sort of abstract. But those of you that have been seeing Dan for the last 40 days, this is something that happened to him, his family. So this is something that I think you could personalize a little more. You could understand it a little better. And when you speak to people, when you speak to your friends, you speak to your colleagues, speak to people at work, and you discuss this, this is not just another terror attack. This is something to somebody that you know, that you've been following. So I think that that's something that's also very, very important to keep in mind. Now, as far as Shifa Hospital is concerned, anything that Hamas says, we spoke about psychological warfare. In psychological warfare, words are like bullets. And as far as Hamas is concerned, they use words and they use sentences and use press releases as ammunition. And the ammunition they've been using that has been unfortunately working on so many segments of the population who believe it because they want to believe it. As far as that Shifa Hospital has nothing to do as a base for terror, this is something that we've now turned upside down. And when the president spoke about it last evening, and I was listening to it also, this is clearly what he said was on the basis of the images that he saw and the information that he was given. So this is something that's important to get out. It's important also to realize when you read newspaper reports, and I'll speak specifically about the New York Times, when they have a headline or when they have an opening paragraph that starts with, according to Hamas, this is what happened, and according to Israel, this is what happened. That's sort of like saying, according
to the Nazi regime.
Right. Imagine that in the 1940s, you say, according to the Nazi regime, we have not been able to verify independently that the Nazis did X, Y, and Z. But according to the Jews, this is what they say is going on. This is exactly what you have here, because Israel makes a contention based on being a democratic state that is oriented toward telling the truth in this case. And Hamas is an organization that commits the worst atrocities that you could have, but yet they're given some sort of credibility in terms of, according to them, statements that you see in the press. So that's important to keep in mind, Dan. So what you're talking about in terms of Shifa, what's coming to light, we hope that the information that's going to be presented out there is going to be presented in a way that that will have people see exactly what's going on.
Well, I think the information that our intelligence and security forces showed the Americans is so completely, unconditionally, and absolutely compelling and true that there was no way to avoid or to contextualize or to say yes, but. I think the point that Dr. Mansdorf is making also is that the numbers that you are hearing, 10,000, 14,000. These are mendacious, erroneous figures that come out of the Hamas Ministry of Health. The Hamas grand deception strategy has been for years and is even more so now to paint Israel as they are. It's a psychological term of mirroring. They are a radical Islamic Nazi ISIS type regime that is doing everything they can to create what is known in psychological warfare literature linkage, which is to link the victim to become and transform him or her into the vanquisher or the oppressor. That is exactly what has happened. Lenny Ben David who is on staff with us as a fellow at Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. He was the former deputy ambassador to Washington back in the late 1990s. He has done
numerical analysis,
a numerical analysis of the bodies, and it is very clear that not only have 10,000 Palestinian Arabs not been killed, but it's less than half that number, and the vast majority of that number, which is half of the stated number, if not less, of the Hamas, are Hamas operatives themselves. Professor Kobi Michael of the INSS has also written a very important article for us on that point. You can get that on our website. These are important points to keep in mind. We are facing a cruel enemy that uses deception as a fundamental strategic strategic approach in order to convince you otherwise than
there are no rules.
The truth. There are no rules. So is Sharren here? Yeah. No, yeah, Sharren is here. Okay, so what one thing that's very important, Erwin, as we discuss this, is to really try to understand how the government is thinking about these issues, and we're really delighted to have Sharren Haskel. Sharren Haskel is a member of the Israeli Parliament from the national, what we call the National Unity Party, or the Miflaga Mamlachti. Is that where we are? The Machaneh Mamlachti, right? Her party that is chaired by Benny Gantz, as well as Gideon Sa'ar, has joined the emergency government. Sharren, whom I know personally for some time, is a very talented MK. She holds a political science degree, a bachelor's degree in international relations as well. She speaks Hebrew, English, and French. She has a Canadian background as well as an Israeli. She was the first female member of Knesset to have served as a combat officer in the IDF and a commander in the border guards. And she's been in the Knesset since 2015, very, very active. Originally joined the New Hope Party, which was of Gideon Sa'ar, and then she joined forces with the Blue and White Party under Benny Gantz. So she is part of the emergency government coalition. We're delighted to have her, a member of Knesset Haskel, welcome to the program. I just want to remind everyone that this program has become an actual television program, Erwin. It's called Frontline Israel, Fighting Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Global Jihad. It's appearing on JLTV every day in a 22 to 30-minute format. So we're delighted to announce that it gets to up to 75 million homes across the United States. Sharren Haskel, a member of Knesset, it's a really great pleasure to have you with us.
Hello, it's a great pleasure to be with you too.
Wonderful. Member of Knesset Haskel, we're at a critical juncture now. The Shifa Hospital revelation has become a major vindication for what the government has been saying, the IDF has been saying now for an awfully long time regarding the lies and the deceptions of the Hamas. And by the way, no different than the Palestinian Authority deception as well. But here we're facing in Gaza, we're facing Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the Hamas in a united front against the IDF. What is the discussion right now among the emergency government as to where we are right now and where we're going? Your assessment.
So right now we are at the Shifa compound, starting to unveil a lot of the Hamas facilities that they've got there. This was just the start. With some of the footages that came out yesterday and today, for example, the MRI center, where we found many equipment and weapons and grenades inside this facility in the cupboard behind the MRI system. These are foolproof and evidence that we are collecting to the international community. The other thing that it's important to remember is that the Shifa Hospital is a very, very big compound. There are still patients and medical staff who are there, and we are going from room to room trying to find the the entrance and the hiding of the facilities of Hamas. They are very well hidden, and some of them have like electric doors and they are under tiles. And so we are trying to map and find all of the equipment and all of the entrance to their facilities, to their headquarters, to their rooms as well. It is very, very complicated. It's not easy. It's important to note that not even a single medical staff or patient were hit or harmed during this how do I call it, srika, clearing out.
The operation, the way they were the word srika means
clearing,
right.
Like checking out those rooms and those facilities. Now the other thing is that it will probably take some time. This is happening while we are still combating around the city as well. Today we actually brought in some foreign press, including BBC reporters. I mean, they had a horrific report last night and completely distorted the declaration of the IDF. We actually said that we went into the Shifa hospital with medical staff and with Arabic speakers to make sure that we can help and assist. The IDF brought in medical equipment, including incubators and petrol, to make sure that the people who are sick are being taken care of. And so it's they've distorted it and said that we have aggressively attacked or something like that medical staff and targeted Arabic speakers, which is ridiculous. So they went in with some of the foreign press reporters into the Shifa hospital with the IDF, and what we've showed them is some laptops that were sieged, that were captured, and a lot of evidence are on these laptops, including videos of hostages and people who were kidnapped.
Meaning that proving that the Hamas used Shifa Hospital as a kidnap center, as a hostage to keep the hostages. Now, apparently, they've been moved from Shifa Hospital. Is that correct?
Yeah, and as far as we know, but it's important to say that we haven't cleared the entire compound, which is huge, and we haven't found all of their facility and underground tunneling areas. So it's very important to note that. So we don't know fully yet, but we do know from another hospital that we have entered and completely cleared a few days ago, that in the basement they held some hostages. One of the hostages was a pregnant woman who went into labor, and her baby was actually born in Gaza under captive, which is heartbreaking. I mean, every woman who gave birth in Israel is in complete horror from just imagining a situation where you are being kept as a hostage and going into labor and bringing your kids when Hamas terrorists are all surrounding you and pointing guns at you. We're absolutely horrified from those images who are running through our minds.
So, Sharren, there's a sense we have at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs that the government has been far too tolerant of international organizations as well as the media. I do know, having spent many years in the media myself before entering into policy, that the media tends to get things wrong more than they do to get things right on Middle East for sure, and on Israel all the more so. I'm wondering whether a no tolerance policy towards the BBC, whose reporting has been atrocious on this particular, everyone can see, if you just open up your cell phones, go to Google and just download some of the reports by the BBC, great accents, but horrible reporting, completely missed the facts, completely missed the context, completely missed the basic facts of the case. Is there a position to lodge complaints against these networks that completely get this wrong. That's why we have the government press office. That's why we have the prime minister's office. I'm wondering what your sense is of how tolerant versus intolerant Israel needs to be on a lot of this international reporting, which looks from here like a public relations agency for the Hamas.
Yeah, I mean, it's very sad what we see in the media, the international media, but we're not surprised. I mean, it's always been like that. Time after time, reporters have failed to report the reality or being objective, and they keep on bringing their opinions and their emotions and what they believe, and dismiss them completely, the facts and the truth, and it feels like they completely lack integrity in that journalist aspect of how you meant to report the news. I mean, can you imagine in America people getting their news information and fact from Al-Qaeda while they're at war, or in Iraq taking the information and the facts from ISIS? I mean, if ISIS says that the American did such and such, and would they report that? They understand that it's a terrorist organization. They're using propaganda and they're using a psychological war as much as they're using that front combat war that they are facing today. And much of the war today is being made on social media and on the international, I mean, on the communication and the news. This is a full classic psychological war, and they know that. The leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah as well have stated numerous times, why won't you look after the Palestinians? And they clearly say, we don't need to look after the Palestinians. It's the world that needs to look after the Palestinians. They don't care for their lives. They see them as a mean to their goal, and their goal is to completely eliminate Jews, murder Jews, completely eliminate the state of Israel. And the international media is playing a big part on it. I've been giving interviews on many channels. Some of them are very difficult. When you speak about the BBC, I did interviews in the South African broadcasting agency, and if I show it to you, you don't know whether you should laugh or cry. There's a big question whether this is just a hatred towards Israel or some kind of a racist kind of view. I mean, it's fashionable to be a pro-Palestinian today. You go out in demonstration and it's like you're part of this fashion that's running around, and you feel bad on saying no. And it's completely twisted. But
that's why I think we have to stop, Sharren. I think that the government, you've spent a lot, you as one of really the more outstanding MKs on the issue of foreign affairs and foreign relations. I know you, for many years, you've been dealing with the international media, international organizations, and institutions, and so on. And it seems to me that the whole discourse about what's pro-Palestinian has to be completely re-engineered, because what's happening internationally, whether it's the BBC or whether it's network television or whether it's the campuses across the United States or whether it's the political discourse, when they call themselves pro-Palestinian, they're really not. They're really Nazi Hamas sympathizers, without exaggerating, and that has nothing to do with being pro-Palestinian. That's the point that our very own fellow Khalid Abu Talmeh makes as an Arab Israeli Muslim. He says what's happening today has nothing to do with helping the Palestinians. It has to do only with advancing the genocidal agenda, self-declared, of the Hamas itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, we don't have many tools to combat it except of bringing out the facts and having enough organization that's going to echo the reality and the truth and the facts that we're bringing out. I can go to the Prime Minister press office and they can, they can send a letter to the BBC. I will put aside the channels like Al Jazeera and even Reuters that are completely biased and have no relation to any kind of facts or reality, and they're trying to really engineer our conscience and the way we perceive reality. And for that, I've called numerous times to ban and to not let Al Jazeera or these channels to broadcast from here in Israel. This has been on a debate right now. It's been to the government, on the government table, and I hope they'll approve it, because those channels have no place here in Israel.
Sharren, last just question about is some office in the government petitioning the International Criminal Court, which is empowered to prosecute individuals, not just state actors. And here you have individuals, whether it's Mohammed Def or whether it's Ismail Haniyeh, the leaders of Hamas are guilty of double and triple war crimes, and wondering all these years, the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, and even the Hamas, through their international relations division, if we can believe that they actually have one, which they do, are referring Israelis to the International Criminal Court for prosecution. Are we doing the same thing to these Hamas leaders?
So there's we don't do that, and I think, and don't catch me on the exact thing, but from what I understand, Israel doesn't take any part in the International Criminal Law Court in Hague. We're not signed on this treaty, and there because and therefore we don't prosecute through it either, because we don't want to recognize them as an authority. It's also biased, and we had an issue there with some kind of investigation that they wanted to do. I'm not going to go into too much details about it, but through the private courts or Supreme Courts in every country that you can sort of sue individually, there's a very interesting comment by a very known international law professor. I posted it on my Twitter. I'll try and find his name. He's been advising the United Nations on international law and war crimes and things like that. And he's very, very known. He's a professor and a lecturer in Austria, in Vienna. And what he said is that the proof here, his name is Professor Gilad Ben Nun. And from what he says, he's a historian of the international law and the Geneva Accord. And he says that that the proof that we got from the hospital where we found their Hamas equipment, and it clearly gives enough evidence that hostages were kept in hospital, that they have full ammunition and bunkers in hospital. It's all in evidence and in videos. Actually clear Israelis from being prosecuted individually in different countries' court. He says that what is the international court language says that they have evoked, and I'm trying to translate it from Hebrew, but they evoke the section of unwar immunity, where you have immunity on certain facilities like religious centers and hospitals, and they actually absolutely evoke that from the Geneva Accord. And by using those facilities for war purposes, it means that they probably will not be able to get, they're not meant to get any arrest warrant by foreign countries' court for Israeli soldiers and officers. It's interesting. He says he is writing it right now, and I'm waiting for him to take out this how do you call it, opinion or article. I won't be sure how to translate it to English. Parshanut.
Explanation, commentary, explanation.
Commentary, explanation, and opinion on it, chavat da'at. But when he pulls it out, it's very, very considered, because he's a real, very known and respected historian of the international law.
Great, Sharren. Let's move to government policy. We've got 240 children, toddlers, infants, women men who, in an unprecedented act of hostage taking, there hasn't been such a mass hostage taking by a terror organization in modern history at one time. What's happened in Gaza is commensurate with 12,500 Americans being taken hostage in a 24-hour period, unprecedented in modern history. Question: is the government of Israel, in your opinion, prepared to make a deal for less than or fewer than the full 240 hostages, essentially giving Hamas the ability to determine the hostage negotiation process? Or is the position of the government that they better return every single hostage otherwise or else?
So we can't comment too much on what is happening now. Personally, if it's not a major deal, it's going to release most of our hostages. It's going to be very difficult for me to accept any kind of deal like that. Our heart is with these people. Our heart is with the hostages, with the children, with the women, with the elderly, with everybody, with the men. I mean, I can't imagine what they're going through. And I don't think that personally a serious deal that's going to release the vast majority of them should be on the table. We need to push Hamas as far as we can and pressure on them in order to bring all of them back home. We want all of them back.
So, in other words, you can't. You obviously can't comment because you're in the middle of negotiations with various interlocutors, including Qatar, arguably part of the problem, not only the solution. But having said that, we're in the middle of negotiations. Okay, a policy question. There is a lot of talk on the international scene, as I'm sure you know very well, and there's a lot of talk at the Jerusalem Center, which is we are dealing with policy issues on what they call Yom Ha'arei, the day after. There is a lot of talk coming from the U.S. administration. The President Biden, we have great respect for his very recent statements, giving Israel whatever amount of time that Israel needs in order to defeat and essentially collapse the Hamas leadership, also militarily and politically. However, there's discussion about bringing back the Palestinian Authority leadership, whose leadership obviously failed miserably in 2007 when they were subject to a coup by the Hamas. What's the position? Is there a position of the government on the Palestinian Authority? Our position here is that it would be an utter disaster to bring back an authority that essentially reflects the Hamas positions in everything from Soviet and Nazi conspiracy to blatant anti-Semitism, radicalism, educating for mass murder, and so on. What's the view of the government on the Palestinian Authority as a potential inheritor of the responsibility for Gaza?
So the official point is not clear yet, and they're not really talking about it. I agree with you personally. And what I think is obviously only my opinion and not the government opinion, okay? Personally, I think there has to be a territorial toll for what had happened on the 7th of October, because that's the language that the Middle East speak. And they need to understand that such atrocities will have a territorial price. We need a strip of security that will always be secure here in Israel. And to be honest, I think and I believe we have to think outside of the box. I did a couple of interviews to Saudi newspaper. And I believe, thinking outside of the box is the right solution. For example, and I still don't know what are all the ramifications and everything. And I still need to research it more in depth, but maybe one of the solutions would be as a wider deal of normalization with Saudi Arabia, if they want the cooperation of security and defense against some of their enemies and Iran in the Middle East. They need to be part of the security of Israel also in this area. And maybe we should try and maybe think of some kind of a Saudi governance, or a temporary hold of the Gaza Strip, working by Saudi laws, making sure that they keep the safety and the security in the area. It's far wider than that, but this is just one of some outside of the box kind of solutions. I think we have to think about those kind of things. None of the Arab countries want the Palestinian problem in their backyard. They understand that some of the look on Egypt. The biggest exporting of Gaza to Egypt is ISIS troops. Okay, they're not talking about it, but that's the reality. Most of the ISIS soldiers in the Sinai desert are Gazan citizens. They've murdered their people in mosques, in churches, made terrorist attacks on military bases in Egypt, murdering Egyptian soldiers. They're as much of a problem for the Egyptians as much as it's a problem for Israelis. And not many people want to deal with that problem. The war is not a territorial war, but it's sort of a cultural and a religious war. And I think most Western countries have to realize that. We know that. It has to be dealt in those kind of manner. It needs to be addressed as a religious and cultural war and a conflict. And as that, a territorial solution is not a solution for a religious and a cultural war. It's not like a normal territorial conflict where you can resolve it in a Western kind of manner and diplomatic agreements. We've seen it doesn't work in the Middle East. It's a completely different conflict. And so for that, we have to think outside of the box on how we resolve that or how we sort of maintain that.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about out of the box, you're really also talking about the double-headed problem, because you've got the same exact problem, Judea and Samaria, with the PLO's Palestinian Authority. So it seems what I'm inferring from what you're saying is that October 7th until today requires a completely new way of thinking about how to solve the issue of 1,700,000 Palestinian Arabs living under Palestinian Authority control in Judea and Samaria, and in Gaza another 1.95 million Palestinians. The notion that is being trotted out and touted in the West of what they call a two-state solution, or which some people say already exists, because Gaza is a de facto state. And we see what the result has been of what is essentially has been a Hamas-stan sovereign state. Out of that state, they came and massacred people in kibbutzim next door. You mentioned the concept of a buffer, of what you called a strip, but I think we're returning back to the school of thought called defensible borders, gevulot b'nei hagana, which was a concept back after the 1967 war that applied only to Judea and Samaria because of the hill ridge, 3,300 feet above sea level. But now, having spoken to many of the mayors of the southern Israeli cities, we really need defensible borders in the south, in the north for the Golan Heights opposite Hezbollah, Iran, as well as in the east in Judea and Samaria. So it seems we've been doing a lot of work on that for the last 15 years, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. So it seems, from what I'm understanding, you're saying we really need to revive the whole defensible borders for a little Israel concept as we move forward in out-of-the-box thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I'd love to sit down with you and maybe try and think of different solutions who are outside of the box. I think that many research that maybe have been done emphasizing the cultural aspect of it is extremely important at this moment to try and find a real solution, not just a band-aid to put on, a serious wound,
Absolutely. In fact, I want to offer you the opportunity. We're going to have to finish up in our briefing. We have a wonderful community of people here with us today. I want to offer you just another opportunity to share your final your final observations. We'll be very delighted to have you as a guest at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. We have a lot of relationships with Arab countries above the radar and below the radar who are, believe it or not, today anxious to help. I'll mention to you just a secret together that just happened yesterday. At this particular moment, we had the Sheikh Obed, who was the head of the Bedouin tribes in Iraq and in Syria, in tears over the massacre on October the 7th, and he requested that we stand together with him to pray with him as he prayed in Arabic on behalf of the murder victims on October the 7th, which was sort of an extraordinary moment that we haven't yet told anyone. So this is sort of hot news for you and for our listeners, but it was quite a dramatic and emotional moment for all of us. And the point is, Sharren, that there are many actors in the Arab Muslim world that are with Israel, and this is exactly what the Iranian regime tried to destroy on October the 7th, was to massacre those relationships. And so we are here to say those relationships are intact. The Saudis are waiting in the wings to see if Israel will impose an overwhelming defeat on this radical access. And so I think there is a lot to talk about as we move forward. Your last observation, Sharren, before we have to say goodbye to you for today. We'd love to have you back again as we do these daily, and to our wonderful friends and families and colleagues from across the seas who are participating with us on this Zoom update.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for hosting me. I think it's so important that involvement and creating a well educated and factual based research on everything that is happening here. I think that here in Israel, everything has changed since the 7th of October. Right now, we're feeling that like they've been sort of a stop clock that has stopped everything. And once the war will end and we will win, then it will sort of start back. But the full reality of our people, of our country, has completely changed. Every conception that we've had have been sort of challenged. And I think it's a very good time for us with the Greaves to grow stronger, better, and find our common future in a stronger and a more powerful way. People right now are all thinking outside of the box, and so things that were relevant before 7th of October are not relevant anymore. Our world has tumbled and completely changed. And I think there's a fertile ground at the moment to create real discussions with many groups that sometimes I would disagree or they would disagree with me, in order to grow better from where we were, and in order to find how to create a better future in this very tough neighborhood.
Well, we'll look forward to doing that with you. We've got lots and lots of ideas. We've actually been meeting on that Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and we're coming out with a number of policy initiatives over the next couple of weeks, actually. Clearly, the first order of business is to decapitate and collapse permanently the Hamas leadership from a terror, military, and political point of view. And then obviously we will have to move towards out-of-the-box policy thinking and action from there, because we are in uncharted waters, certainly since 1948, definitely since 1967, when we came into the territories of Judea and Samaria after being attacked by 4 Arab neighbors, who are now, 2 of which are now our peace partners to a certain degree. So we'll have to leave it at there. We'll have to leave it at that. And thank you ever so much, Sharren, for sharing your insights and your commentary. And we'll look forward to hosting you here at the JCPA very shortly. And I want to thank all of you. I'm looking at all the names. I can't read all of them, but I'm looking at all the names. And I thank many of you for joining us every day and for supplying us with your questions and your kind attention to these matters. Thank you to also to Professor Erwin Mansdorf a clinical psychologist, international trauma specialist on staff with us at Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Have a quiet day, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Or we'll see tomorrow.
And thank you very much.
We'll
Thanks
see you
for all
Sunday.
the support of. Thanks very much for all the support that everybody gives and in these times of need. And thank you so much for hosting me today.
All the best.